Les, it's an honor. Survivorman was one of my favorite shows growing up.
Ah, thank you.
Of course, it was Survivorman and The Office. Those were the only two shows that I wouldn't miss. And then there was a crossover episode, and I was like,
Yeah, that was actually a very surreal point in time for me because The Office was at its all-time peak. It was their peak season, and Steve Carell only ever wrote himself wrote 2 episodes of the whole series, and that
wow.
was one of them that he wrote because he was an actual fan. It wasn't a made-up thing for him. And they contacted me to actually be on the episode. But, then the writer's strike happened, and so they couldn't make any changes, so they had to go with the script they already had, but it was still an amazing honor and really surreal because when I saw it on live television. I didn't see it, like, later or ahead of time or anything like that. I saw it as it was presented, so it was pretty surreal. It was a moment where you're going, "Okay, this is getting crazy. This is awesome."
Yeah, I remember in junior high, I had a gym coach who was always saying, like, you didn't even break a sweat. You didn't even work up a sweat. And I was always like, are you trying to kill me? Because if you
Yeah.
sweat, you die. And he never knew what the hell I was talking about. Anyway, so you had an experience in Alaska, I think in 2006. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I've told the story before. It's a weird one because I've had lots of different experiences out there, and you get into that place where, depending on your experience level with natural history, and mine's pretty extensive. So I know what a moose looks and sounds like, and what it does. I know what bears look and sound like. I know what they do, and wolves, and so on. And this was one of those times when I couldn't really pin it down. It was too freakish. It was too weird to pin it down and say, well, that was a bear grunting. But it was, I was actually filming Survivorman. And the thing for me was I wasn't doing anything at all to do with Bigfoot, Sasquatch. I was filming Survivorman. It was like one of those, it was a moment I didn't want to happen. I was busy doing my thing. And while I was filming, and you can see it in the original Survivorman film, you can see me looking over to the bush and I keep checking, like, what's going on over there? But I don't say anything. Turn the cameras off and I'm just sort of moving around, and then all of a sudden I just hear this grunting in the tree, but it sounded, exactly like a great ape. And he did it 5 times in a row with a little break in between, incredibly loud, and not at all like any bear or any moose would grunt or sound. It sounded like an ape, except that it was Alaska. And it looked to be about 20 feet up in the tree. And the trees were shaking, and I just stood there frozen. Um, but of course, I'm thinking I should try to press record on the camera at the very least to capture the audio. But I was still kind of frozen in space. I didn't want to move. So then I moved. I went to go move and do the camera. And that's when all of a sudden, as soon as I moved, it just took off. But it took off sort of, you could, I could hear the thud as it landed on the ground and then crashing through the forest like a freight train away from me. And and that was the end of it, I was there for a while, and your brain's going to all kinds of places. Like the part of you is, of course, well, it had to be a grizzly bear, had to be a grizzly, had to be a grizzly, had to be, that's what you're telling yourself. But there's these other senses that are like, I know grizzlies really well. I mean, hell, I shot a whole series, on them for National Geographic, you know, and um, uh, and so, mind you, that was later, but it doesn't matter. You're just left there, but all I did was I stored it. I just stored it in my memory bank. That okay, well, what the hell? And you just let it go. And that's one of the weird phenomenons in a lot of these situations is you don't sit there thinking, I need to document this properly and take down scientific notes and write down the time of day. And you don't think any of that stuff at all. You just go, huh, and you carry on with your life. And that's the crazy thing about it.
And it's such a catch 22 because, I'm inclined to say, well, grizzly bears can't climb trees. But then at the same time, it's like, well, Bigfoot's not real. So what's more likely, a grizzly bear high in a tree or a Bigfoot?
Exactly, and that's what rattles around in your brain. It's like, when you're watching someone who fervently stands behind what they say they saw, if they're claiming an eyewitness, and they will say you're standing there looking at something that you know doesn't exist.
Right. I am curious. I have my suspicions, but why didn't you mention it in the episode?
Oh, because at that point I was like, rocking it with Survivorman. And I sort of, I think instinctively knew that if I say the word Bigfoot in the middle of this show where, you got to remember, I was pretty in earnest when it comes to Survivorman. I just wanted to teach you outdoor survival skills. And I did not want someone like yourself watching at home going, wait a minute, what did he just say? I didn't want to distract from what I was about. And I was about teaching survival skills. The whole, is there a Bigfoot out there was nothing. It was a sideline. It certainly wasn't my focus. My focus was teaching great outdoor skills. That's why I was there. So I didn't want to distract.
My assumption was that you would have assumed that the viewers would have been like, "Oh, he's just trying to get views," because it's such an outrageous thing to happen.
Well, not back in those days though.
Well, not
So
views,
see,
but
yeah, but you see, because back in
publicity.
like what you're saying right now relates very much to the way everything is now. How many views are you getting? How many followers are you getting? How many likes are you getting? Blah, 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 blah. Right. That was not a thing back when I was filming Survivorman pre social media explosion. Yes, there was some beginning, but it was not what it is now. So your mind, my mind as a filmmaker was never thinking, oh, if I mention Bigfoot, people will assume that I'm just trying to get them to watch my show. I just didn't care. It had nothing to do. I was a film producer, a documentary film producer, documenting a series about survival and teaching you how to survive out in the wilderness. That was it. So anything else just never even came into play in my mind.
So you just didn't want to distract. That's all.
Didn't want to distract.
Okay,
Simple. Yeah.
fair enough. So you and I are both if people. Like we don't say Sasquatch requires a tremendous amount of calories. We say if Sasquatch is real, it would require a tremendous amount of calories. That being said, because I've never seen it and I know that you've never seen one, um, that being said, do you think that it's possible for such a creature to exist undetected, assuming it's flesh and blood?
Easy.
Really?
Easy peasy. Absolutely. And anybody who's ever traveled out into the wilderness extensively would have to give that answer because just logistically speaking, in terms of biology, in terms of geography, yeah. To cut myself short is just say absolutely and easy.
Have you seen there's a BBC video on the chimp memory tests? Is that something that you're familiar with?
On the what? On the chimp memory test?
Chimp memory tests?
No, do tell.
It's very interesting. There's basically numbers come on a screen, and these chimps they have to memorize the numbers. They have all the time they want to memorize the numbers, and then the numbers disappear when the test starts, and then they have to press the numbers in order, and then they get like a grape or something, and they perform it with 90% success. And it's funny because the scientists, the people who made the test, they do take the same test and they get less than 10% correct. And it's funny because these chimps, they're so casual. They're doing this for a grape. They're like, and then you have these scientists who are like trying to be smarter than a chimpanzee or like sweating bullets. And that's one of the things that keeps me going. It's like we don't know how that brain power translates, and that's just a chimp. So think of something, orders of magnitude better than a chimp. That would be kind of crazy.
Well, and this is the thing. We are desperately, if this conversation carries on, if this subject matter comes up, people desperately try to put it in the box. We need to put it in a box that we understand.
Right.
And what box are we putting it in? Our human box. Oh, it's a big hairy human? Okay, then let's fit it in our small hairless human box. And that just doesn't work, I don't think. Uh,
No,
you
because
you and I'm not trying to stretch into the we need to all have an open mind and because you never know. But it's more a matter of come on, start to make some scientific sense of this. Stop believing that this version of the human species, we're the pinnacle. That's a problem. We just think we're the pinnacle. And that's a problem because I mean, related to another situation, I got a chocolate lab sitting 6 feet from me, curled up on the. I can't smell like that lab. I can't see like an eagle. Those two basic skills right there, or attributes right there, blow my human species, my figuration of me away. So to try to place this phenomenon that we call Sasquatch into our box, it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't make sense on the existential version of all of this, but it also doesn't even make sense scientifically.
Right. So I think we can all agree that the most interesting evidence or thing basically that you suggested in or that you presented in the Survivorman Bigfoot series was the apple, I think in Return to Radium Springs. Would you agree that that was probably one of the most interesting things that you personally uncovered?
Well, that's a subjectional question because everybody's going to find something different, more interesting. I think if you remember what was, I guess I would say, most intriguing to me on that particular episode, if you remember, um, at the very, very end, I say, well, what's this? And when there's that little head, and I'll do it with my screen here. There's that little head that sort of comes up like this and the story behind that was that we had no idea it was there. It was 6 months later that my editor said, what about that head at the end of the footage? And I'm like, talking on the phone to my editors or probably on Skype or something at the time. What head? What are you talking? The head that comes up at the bottom of the screen. What are you talking about? And I think it was Graham it was Graham who spotted it, my editor Graham. And I'm like, show me what you're talking about. And then it was like a what the moment. Because like I didn't even know that was there, guys. Okay. We need to tell that story because holy crap. So I had no idea that head that comes up at the bottom of the screen and drops down again, which is over 7 feet in the air.
Right, that's because it can't be a bear then, right? Because you'd have to see ears if it was a bear. That
You'd
can't be
see
a
the
bear's butt.
ears, the whole it's not anything smaller than something that can be 7 feet tall and has a kind of shaped like my fist that I'm doing right there, that has that kind of conical, I guess you'd say, and then drops down again. And I know from being there that was a 7 foot in the air spot. Yeah, that's still, I have no answer for you on that one because that one still is like, man, I wish there was something more that we could go with on that because it's intriguing as hell.
The only skeptic response I can think to that would be that there was like are pikas that far up?
Well, the problem is that it's in front of the tree. It's literally in the air. Pikas are that far up, and we actually have footage of a pika messing with the trail cam.
Okay, well, so
But a
so like,
pika's this
um,
big.
imagine a rodent eating from behind. So like, it's eating from behind. The apple loses its structural integrity and falls, and then the pika jumps after it. But then like an elk runs by because the tree shakes, doesn't it?
But all of that would have had to have been caught on camera
Right.
because that was the night my camera, did not fail. See, the first night the camera got knocked down, and it was knocked down probably by a pika. No big deal, right? So second night I've set it so it couldn't fall down. So that camera was, and I say this, that camera was capturing motion as gentle as a moth going through the corner of the frame.
Right.
And it was picking it up, and oh, there's the moth. So the stuff you wouldn't have seen because we're not going to include it in the edit, right? So any like an owl landing and grabbing the apple, the pika climbing up, uh, even the apple falling just falling off, and it couldn't have fallen off the limb. It was jammed in there solid. Um, would have all been picked up by the motion camera because it picked up everything else.
Including human interference.
Human interference, exactly. And at this point, I was working with an associate there,
Right.
and Todd Stanning, and he had left. He'd gone down to the bottom of the mountain. He was with my crew at the bottom of the mountain, so it wasn't like he snuck back up. I was up there alone.
So my personal favorite, or like, I just thought this was the most interesting, I guess, was the pinniped spinal column. I think the sea lion.
Yeah.
Was that as nuts as it looked? Because I'm not as nearly as outdoorsy as you, but I've seen deer carcasses. I've never seen anything that meshed together. Like it was like a puzzle piece, and then it was like an arrow. Am I correct in saying that that looked like an arrow pointing straight at like a nest?
All of it. All of it, yes, and it freaked the crap out of me. And I still wish I could find someone to this day who's like a fisherman on the coast says, "Oh, we see that all the time." I mean, "Oh, okay, no big deal. It was a seal that was pulled up, and it's just that's what bears do." But I mean, you're right. Everything about that was so insanely perfect. And you could say, and if you okay, let's say we want to throw in human, someone was we it was in the middle of we didn't even know we were going there. It was in the middle of nowhere, in terms of the boating, and it was like, hey, what's that kind of thing that I spotted? It was just impossible. Again, and this is the stuff that when I was on Joe Rogan, as you've been, um, where it's like when you don't have an explanation, it's like, well, okay, well then we're just not going to believe it. But when you were the one that was there, you're like, okay, again, I'm drawing my natural history experience and I'm looking at something that shouldn't happen in the wild. I've never seen it happen in the wild. Nobody I know has ever seen it happen in the wild. Then you're left, scratching your head.
Right. Because so one of the best witness I've ever spoken with about Bigfoot. He found three water moccasins, and they were like wrapped up like a pretzel knot, and it was along a waterway, not the part that he boated past, but looking back, he thinks it was off like a causeway into that waterway. And I often wondered what those three snakes would look like once all the flesh was gone.
Hmm. And they were dead. They were alive. They were.
One of them was still alive, actually. The other one was throwing up a fish, and the other one was dead. Or two of them were dead. One of the dead ones was throwing up a fish.
Well, I mean, if you want to conjecture this, you know, with the phenomenon of Sasquatch and the tree breaks and the tree twistings and all these and rock formations and all that sort of stuff, if you allow for it, and again, I'm really glad you said we're if people, if you allow for it, then like the chimpanzees in the experiment you talked about, you have to allow for a level of intelligence we're not familiar with. Higher, lower, it's the same, it doesn't matter. Just an intelligent uh, thing level. Then you have to allow for communication. And the concept of utilizing the forest in ways, whether bones, snakes, or trees, or rocks, or branches and leaves, for communication is a no-brainer. Of course, you would. I mean, First Nations tribes throughout North America, throughout history, would communicate with each other by doing tree formations and tell a whole story. So that when their partner comes along 5 days later, go, okay, you know what, my brother is headed up to the mountain lake. I can tell, but because that's just what I mean. We've done it, and so you have to allow for the phenomenon to possibly do that as well.
Right? Yeah. That seal skeleton to me just looked like it was saying, "Hey, there's a giant bear that hangs out here, just so you know."
Well, to me, I thought it's got to be natural. It's got to be a bear. The problem I have with it, was that it was in perfect condition. That's the part I can't get. Like every set of bones I've ever found that were eaten by a predator were ripped to shred and scattered around. I mean, I find cougar kills and bear kills and stuff all the time, and they're just some ungulate that was eaten, and they're just ripped apart. This was just perfect, and I still don't have an answer for that one.
Okay, this question is just because of my curiosity. What would you do if had you been filming Survivorman before the Bigfoot season, and you legitimately heard the Sierra Sounds type noises?
Probably the same thing that I did when I heard the sounds in Alaska. I would store it because you have to remember that over the years, there's a tipping point when it comes to this phenomenon. There's a very obvious and clear tipping point, and I'll get to it. Before that tipping point, this was myth, lore, legend, the story somebody's uncle told, and all we always stories that people just stored in their brain. It's like, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. You know what? My uncle told me a story once. That's all it ever was
Right.
for years and years, regardless of the Patterson film, regardless of casted footprints. Sure, there was a couple of really out there sort of people who were into it, but up until a certain tipping point. And what was that tipping point? Tipping point was modern media. And what was the thing that first launched it all? It was the series Finding Bigfoot. And Finding Bigfoot came along, and I'm well on record of saying this. I respect Cliff a lot. I like Cliff very much. Really nice man. But that series in itself, I always hated. And why? Not that the town halls were fun, because it's just people telling their stories. Everything else I hated because it was obvious reality TV made up crap, filming stuff at the side of a parking lot. And I didn't like that because I was one of those people who had 3 or 4 "what the hell was that" kind of situations, and I thought it was, and even when I was a little kid and I might have heard about it somewhere, it was just a fascinating, "Wouldn't it be cool if that were real, that there was this species out there?" But along comes this television series, and that is what changed this all, because it didn't take it seriously. It was reality television. It made it a cultural punchline. That's why I ended up making my series, was kind of in reaction to that series. Um, but my point was going to be that up until that point, when you say, what would you do? What would you have done if I would have done the same thing that I already did and what everybody else did? You would have just stored it and said, man, there was this time, I swear, I saw this freaking 10-foot thing, at the edge of a creek. And, I don't know, man. I'm just telling you what I saw. That's it. That's the way it was always stored up until it became a media phenomenon. That changed everything.
Well, I would have been hitting that transponder as fast as humanly possible.
Well, you mean, well, in terms of like running out and all the rest, fear for sure. So I remember hearing bipedal steps come close to my tent one night. Why didn't I unzip and look out the tent? Part of me didn't wanted to listen to see what was going to happen, and I was with my ex-wife at the time, and instead I yelled. There's an instinctual fear that kicks in when you're dealing with an
Sure.
unknown, I'm not that. I'm not going to play brave and tough. I mean, I've stood and had a 650-pound grizzly bear walk up within 3 feet of me. That I understand, but the unknown I don't understand. I try to think I'd be cool about it, but I've had opportunity to stick closer to a situation like that, and I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'm good. Maybe now I've got the kahunas to go and say, okay, let's just see. But because I'm older, but I haven't had that up until now, that's for sure. I mean, come on. When you're dealing with the unknown, even back before Finding Bigfoot, and it was just the lore and the stories, but you're talking about The Legend of Bogey Creek was a movie
Hmm.
that was made. You're talking about scary things. So whether it's ghosts or aliens or Bigfoot or whatever, who really has the cojones to just say, "Man, I would face it." It's like, yeah, good thing to say it. You're on your
Right.
couch.
The only time that I was a had reason to believe there was a Bigfoot around, I just kept thinking like, I really hope there's not a Bigfoot around. So it's like, what kind of Bigfoot hunt is that?
Well, it's true in reality though. You feel all of those instincts kick in. I mean, we're fight or flight syndrome, right? And when it's something terrifying.
I'm really glad that I started watching your director's cuts, that
Thank
you've been
you.
uploading, of course. Tell us a little bit about the Smoky Mountains when you went out there
Well, you just saw
alone.
that recently, didn't you?
I saw that last night, and I'm so
Yeah.
glad I did. Oh,
Uh,
before you start, I had an extremely similar experience to that I would like to share when you're done.
all right. Well, as I did share on the director's commentary, but I had not shared during the making of the Survivorman Bigfoot series.
Hmm.
So can we go to that first? Why not?
Of course.
Why didn't I include that in the original episode? Because through that year, you have to think about where you start with this phenomenon. You start on Gigantopithecus. You start on a big ape. You then eventually ascribe more intelligence to that ape. It gets smarter and smarter and smarter as and then you're getting like, you start to give it attributes that are deeper, such as octopus-like cloaking or lion-like infrasound. And the needle starts moving. And what I've said is like, I'll just go with me for a while on this. There's like this gradient, this dial, and over here is it's a great ape that has remained hidden. And you have experts such as, which I respect highly, such as Jeff Meldrum. And they're doing really great research into that. And then the dial starts moving if you keep going, depending on how open-minded you are and so on. And for me, I'm filming this series called Survivorman Bigfoot, and I'm going out with, over on this side of the dial, looking for a big smart ape, establishing things such as, yeah, they could be out here and be unhidden. And then you get into but why are they not seeing on a trail cam? Well, maybe they can see the energy and the lights and they can see the electricity. You can rationalize an answer, but then you just start getting into weird things. And the subject of what's silly about this is you hear it called mind speak, right?
Hmm.
Which I think is just dorky. Okay, you're talking about telepathy. Can we just call it telepathy, guys? Can we just can we stop calling it mind speak like we're in some sort of club? It's telepathy. We're talking about telepathy. Okay,
Right.
so first of all, now we have to hit the brakes and go back and go, okay, let's deal with telepathy first. So you deal with that. Let's say you land on just to fast forward this, you land on, well, I believe and agree that telepathy can happen amongst human beings. I think it's a thing. Okay, so you've landed on that. Well, before my experience in Smoky Mountains, I wasn't even aware of Mindspeak. I hadn't read anything yet on it. I hadn't read that book yet or those books yet. I hadn't talked to that researcher yet. I was still just looking for pretty smart ape. But I was now out with Scott Carpenter, rest in peace, a wonderful human being. And Scott's more on the spiritual side. But we're not talking about mind speak or anything like that. He's just more talking about in relation to the Bible, the Nephilim, things like that. So he's over there. So I'm learning from him about that. I'm like, well, that's pretty wild. Hadn't heard about that one, which led me off into going down the historical road and finding it, like creatures mentioned throughout, thousands of years of history. Okay, fine. So when I was walking out from my night, and I wasn't going to do a whole night, I said, Scott, I'll tell you what, leave me out there until it gets dark. I'll walk out in the dark. This is your hot spot. Because I always do that with people. I'd say, oh, you got a hot spot. Can I go hang out in the hot spot? And so, which again is like Mindspeak is another term we're using, hotspots, for where they are seen more. So that's fine. I'll go with that. So put me out there. And again, Scott was wonderful. He goes, well, you stay out here for a while. Something's going to happen. Okay, Scott. All right. Then you go back to the parking lot. I'll stay here till dark. I mean, this is my territory. This is the bush. I'll to this day, I'll walk out in the pitch black of night without a flashlight. And I'm not claiming bravado. I'm just so comfortable in the wilderness. I'll go do it. Doesn't matter. And I've done it many times. Doesn't matter to me.
That's why you're the perfect guy to do all this.
That's what I thought,
Right.
I
Right.
mean, just as a tangent note, I remember one time hearing a freaky, sorry, I'm trying to put my computer down here for you. A freaky howling out in my woods at home, and I thought, well, I'm going to go see what that is. And I walked for the longest distance. Now, to be fair, I did take my chocolate labs with me on a leash, but I still went out in the dark. And then it was just a hound howling, and eventually it stopped. But in any event, so I'm out there. Okay, I'm going to hang out here in the bush, and I sat by a tree, and I filmed myself, and it's like, okay, this is interesting, and it's like any other night in the bush for me, you know, except for my purpose and except for I'm in a place that Scott had a lot to say about, that is supposed to be very active, hotspot. So that's fine. I'm on my way back. And when I was on my way back, I was talking to the camera. Now you notice that I start talking to the camera about having that feeling, the hair back on the back of your neck sort of going up. Well, the reason why I started talking like that was because I started feeling like that. Now, again, let's put this in perspective. It's nothing for me to walk out in the wilderness in the pitch dark. I'm so comfortable, not bravado. I'm just comfortable, experienced, right? So to get that feeling is a weird thing for me. It's very rare. And on the very rare occasion that I might have had it in a natural history sense, I look over and say, oh man, there's a wolf right over there on that berm. Look at that. And he's been watching me this whole time. So it's been very rare in my life. But this one just happened. And so I remember filming it and wanting to tell you as the viewer about that. Just say, okay, I've got that feeling, everybody. I got my camera rolling. I'm just going to stay, and I'm literally thinking I will prove that it's probably just a black bear walking around, you know, and I'll get the camera and I'm sure it's just a deer, or something that's kind of, well, it wouldn't be a deer that freaks me out. Probably would have to be a predator, but in terms of biology and all that. And I'm going to prove this. And then as you listen to the commentary, would happen, which has never happened before in my life. I'm not someone who'd say, "Hey, I'm psychic." Everybody, I'm not someone who experiences telepathy or anything like that. I'm not reading tarot cards on the side and all that. Nothing at all. I'm pretty pragmatic, sort of oriented sort of guy. But I just had this incredibly strong voice that was in my head. And now this is the part that, for example, guys, like my buddy and your friend as well, Joe, would say, well, you were delusional. You were just hearing shit. It just doesn't mean anything. But all I can say is, look, the voice inside my head was not my voice. I know my own voice is in there, you know, and clear and specific. And which was, if you stay the night, we will come to you. And, sometimes an initial reaction or quick reaction to this is, oh, right. So they speak English, do they? No, no, no. That's not how telepathy works. Telepathy is an understanding you have in your brain. My learned response will translate it into English, into what my brain understands, or Mandarin or Hindi or whatever, any whatever language I'm from. My brain will do that. So no, I'm not saying something spoke English to me. I'm saying something made something known to me in my brain. And so then when it happened, to go right to what you were just talking about, uh, I have no problem saying I chickened out. No problem saying that. Because I was in a big, can I swear on your podcast?
Yes,
I was in a big what the fuck moment.
of course. You can
Okay,
see
I
it on
just
your
heard a voice
face.
in my head. Eh?
You can see it on your face when in the footage.
And if you really know my work, only a few times in my life out there, including one of the other Bigfoot times, if I start talking and in between talking, I'm breathing through my mouth. I do that when I'm nervous. It's a thing. I don't know. I remember playing paintball. If I think I'm going to be able to get somebody, I'll be like,
Sure.
just it's a nerve. And you can see me doing that. Yeah. So that happened. And I didn't know what to do with it.
Do you regret leaving?
Yeah.
Oh, man, I don't know. I don't know if I would have stayed.
Uh, I understand why I didn't. I'm kind of sort of glad that I didn't, because whatever might have happened might have changed my life irreversibly that I didn't want it to. Right. I'm more ready now. Now it's easy. Of course, I'm sitting here on my couch, but I'd like to think that now I'd be okay. All right, I'll stay. But in the moment, it's so easy, because in the moment I'm like, no, it's almost like I'm trying to explain to them, Scott's waiting for me in the parking lot. He's going to get worried. I really should go back. It might rain later. You just like, you almost start babbling, and it was all in that brief moment, and it's what I experienced. And anyone could sit there and go, well, you made that up in your own mind. Okay.
My jaw dropped when I watched that last night because this was only like a month ago. This was not long ago at all. I was out in my backyard at like 4 in the morning. You know when the sky is like that really deep royal blue, like that perfect blue?
It's the best.
It's my favorite thing in the world. But so the sky's like that. I can only see like 3 stars, 3 or 4 stars, the biggest stars. I'm out there with my dog, and then I hear in my voice, mm, just like an M, like MMM, not not HMM, like And I have a very strong internal dialogue or my monologue, like really strong. That's why I like writing so much, because it's really easy for me to just transcribe what I'm thinking.
Mhm.
But this was nothing like that. This was like, like it almost tickled or vibrated, is how different it was. And that's why I really enjoyed watching your episode, because I literally went like this, like I caught, like almost like you could touch it, you know.
Mhm.
And then like I look up to one of the stars, and then I hear, "Are you scared?" "Are you scared?" Twice. And looking back, like, it almost sounded like a Spanish woman. I know how strange that sounds,
No,
but
I
it's
get it.
not my voice, not any type of dialogue I use in my head. And then and as I'm looking at the star, it drops an inch, like, from where I'm looking and then goes up, like a check mark. It goes down and up and away. And that was like a tenth of a second. And it was just one like it's 4 in the morning. I'm an early riser. I get up ridiculously early. And, it's like my favorite kind of weather, favorite kind of night. I'm out there with my dog. And then like it came out of nowhere. And then when you were talking about how it felt like you could walk in and out of it almost, like it left.
I don't have the creepy feeling anymore. It's gone. Now, this is the interesting thing. When I get that creepy feeling, I get it, but it dissipates. It's there for a while, and then it's gone. And it feels, and I know feelings aren't facts, but it feels like something was there, and it left. It's like the energy feels like it's leaving, going away.
Like it felt like it was gone. Like I literally felt like I was in a cloud of something, and then the cloud moved away.
Mhm.
And my dog, he still won't go in the damn yard after dark to poo. He has a poo corner now.
Wow.
I
See, these
Yeah,
these things, they're so difficult to explain and share. And for anyone who's not experienced them in any way, they just completely write it off. Too bad. Too bad for them. That they're going to stay in that bubble, um, because it's incredibly fascinating. And the
right.
thing is, you have to look at the whole picture. I have to look at the whole picture of you and think, is this a guy who has been struggling with schizophrenia all his life? Is this, you have to put all these different things in and go, well, actually, no. You start checking off these boxes, realizing this is not a person who's, it's not about addiction. I was not high. I was not drunk. I was not delusional. I wasn't in emotional stress and trauma. All those things, and yet you're still dealing with something that seems out of the norm. That's so if see, one of the things I think that's really fascinating about this phenomenon, and I do like to go here a lot of times, and rarely people do, but Christopher Noel, Chris Noel, has written about this, and he and I have talked about it, and I think he's got a strong point, and I've been looking at this a lot. Is if you look at in our human species, someone who is a savant, we know there are lots of them out there. They do shit that we just like, what the? So I have a good friend who's called the human calculator, Scott Fansberg, faster than the Japanese computer at doing calculations. Or the human camera, the guy who can look at the skyline of New York, turn around and it's okay. First of all, what the hell is that? That's what are they accessing? Let's pretend. Go with me on for a second. What if this phenomenon, it's Bigfoot, Sasquatch, hominid. What if the entire line, DNA line, were savant? And maybe not savant with one ability, but with 3, 4, 5 different abilities on a savant like level.
Yeah, but does that explain it all?
No, it's not. Nothing's going to explain it all.
Right, because I started like you with the smart ape. I was like, we're looking for like a super smart ape, but as you said earlier, like you just can't get to the end with the smart ape thing.
No, and it's like crossing a creek. You've got to find those stepping stones to get across, right?
Right.
And if we go back to the telepathy thing, and you look at uh, autistic children, that have incredible abilities of telepathy. And we're, being there they are being studied with their mom or their father, or whatever, and it's just blowing your mind. And they're able to do it casually. And this is the thing is, what bothers us as humans is we look at unique abilities, say, and we try so hard. Like if I tried to read your mind right now, I would like, let me meditate for a bit here, and and I burn some incense and smoke something and have some sage. All of those things, that's what we do. But in other situations, like my dog's ability to smell or an eagle's ability to see, it's just like that. My friend's ability as a mathematician, he can do it blindfolded. It's just like, I go, Scott, 1,473 times 13. Boom, like that.
Yeah.
Just like breathing. And so what if this species has all these different things? For them, we get caught up in like, well, this is crazy, man. There's no way it can cloak. Oh, the infrasound, that's intense, but it could be nothing for them. And telepathy. So let's say communication. I mean, sure, we all watch too much Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and all that sort of different stuff, but nonetheless, I mean, wouldn't it be amazing if telepathy was as easy as breathing?
Sure. Absolutely.
Change life, actually, if you think about it. But
It would. Do you okay, you said in one of the episodes, I can't remember which one, but you said that you don't consider yourself a Bigfoot researcher. Do you still agree with that?
yeah, yeah, I think that implies sort of where you're keeping data and writing about it and making notes and this and that sort of stuff. I think that's what that implies. And so I have many great friends who are wonderful Bigfoot researchers, and part of me just doesn't want to take away from what they're truly doing. I like Scott Tompkins, who has the Bigfoot mapping project, that sort of stuff. That's people doing real research, and I don't do that.
Right. I've had to sit down before and think really hard because the distinction becomes so fuzzy if I'm a Bigfoot researcher or if I'm a Bigfoot researcher. Because I feel like you gotta research the researchers more than you research whatever they're doing because it's all about how they're seeing what's going on.
Well, that's the interesting part is with doing Survivorman Bigfoot. As I got into it more, the researchers became more interesting to me than the phenomenon. I mean,
Right.
like,
Exactly.
why?
Oh, yeah.
And so, but I don't get too caught up in that because in the end, hey, you tell me that they're coming in your backyard and your grandmother used to feed them pancakes. Okay, I'm willing to believe whatever you want to tell me for the sake of my own research into what's going on here. So yeah, I will not. I don't see ever calling myself a Bigfoot researcher. I'm a documentary filmmaker, very obviously interested in the subject matter, and I've had my experiences. But I said something recently. Someone asked, I was doing a podcast, and they did a live chat thing or whatever, and someone said, "How will you ensure that you bridge the divide between what all these different people believe about Bigfoot?" Because again, highly respected over here, John Bindernagel, rest in peace, and Jeff Meldrum, and scientists, and then over here, also highly respected individuals, but it's an alien, and they travel through portals, right, and everything in between. How do you bridge that gap? And I said something, and I want to clarify it talking to you because people took it the wrong way. I said, "Oh, that's easy. I'm just going to avoid the crazies." And then I saw like posts on it's like people got incensed about that. And I was kind of chuckling. It's like, so you're saying you are a self-admitted crazy because you're clearly upset about this. But what I meant was the researchers who slam their fist on the table and say, you won't be able to see them. You need to come out with me. I'll show you where they are. It's that kind of like, okay. It's just, let's just all relax here. And if someone is much more main, main about what am I looking for? Medium tempered about it. Just like I do have experiences. If you'd like to come out and look, I'm be willing to. That's one thing. But people get incensed about this stuff, and some people think they're on a mission that Bigfoot has only spoken to them, and it's their mission to allow the world to know that these beautiful creatures from beyond exist, and it's a spiritual connectedness. Da 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 da. And I'm not denying any spirituality to this. I'm just saying I'm looking for level-headed thinking,
Of
no matter
course.
what it is you feel they can do.
Yeah. A lot of people do treat it like a theology for sure.
Yeah, and I'm not even saying that they're wrong, you know, but their fervent belief needs to manifest itself in measured discussion.
And they gotta not think they're the only prophet to talk about it,
Yeah, there's a bit of that.
you know?
The prophet syndrome is definitely out there, and if anybody out there hears that and is offended by that, well, I don't care.
No, I don't either. Um, the Romanian footage, what the hell? Man, I I am not a blob squatch person. I'm not a circle person. In fact, I didn't like Scott Carpenter for the longest time because I thought it was so ridiculous.
Mhm.
Like I only started
Pareidolia.
research. Yeah, just so like, are you serious? I couldn't even look at it. That changed a few years ago, but that is not nothing. That's not leaves in Romania.
So we've had that happen a few times with Survivorman Bigfoot series. People saying they saw one walking across the trail behind me, standing near in the trees behind me, so on and so. And we've had that. And my editor Barry Farrell and I'd say, "Hey, man," and also my editor Luke at times as well. And I'd just say, all right, someone spotted another Bigfoot on our film. Go take a look. And they would go back to the original. If it was tapes, they go back to the original tape. And because we still have those. If it was a card that had been dumped onto a hard drive, they go back to the original dumping, whatever the clearest file we have saved. So the problem is that when you see anything of mine on YouTube, as you know, you're seeing it compressed,
Of course,
6 different ways from Sunday. And then it ends up on television. So you, with the compression of video footage, you have all these artifacts and things that happen, and so it's really easy to look at something and go, what the hell is that? In all of the cases, it was absolutely, and I've said this before, so I'm not letting anybody down that much. It was always a leaf, a branch, it was always that, until the Romania thing. I don't want to say too much because I'm going to address it in the new film, my new film for the
of course.
Kickstarter campaign and all of that I'm doing. But what I can say is we hit a wall with this one. We could not immediately explain it away as being a branch or a rock. And so Barry and I are still working with the footage right now for the sake of it, as part of this new film, actually, to say, okay, come on, man. And that what we got to do further than that. Are there sightings in this area? Let's find out. This is the Transylvanian Alps.
Yep.
Let's find out. And if all of a sudden, if we're hearing, oh, are you kidding? There's thousands of sightings. Oh, no, all right. But it was like, oh no, there's never been one sighted. I'm like, well, so we'll take all of this and weigh it. But I can say, as I'm talking to you right now, that we have not determined that it's a branch or a rock. We're still sitting with it. But I have to admit, that was one I went, whoa, myself. Some of them I'm like, it's going to be a branch, but not this one.
Well, because, and again, I won't go too far, but didn't you say something about hearing an animal or something around at the time, or being chased? Or you almost fell off a cliff? Maybe there was some.
Well, no, it was now interesting you bring that up, because what I'd done is I'd gone too far down and I got myself cliff hung, as they say, and no, ledged. It's called ledged.
Yep.
And so I had to go back up, which was really steep. And I was exhausted, and I was like, man. And one thing I have noticed anecdotally in stories by the many dozen is that people seem to have an encounter, sometimes say eyewitness full-on encounter, when they're in a rough state, injured, they've fallen, they've tripped, they got stuck, when something is going wrong with them. And spiritualist is going to say, well, that's because they're there to help us. That's why they're there, and they're benevolent. Might be true, but either way, there's a correlation with being in the wilderness, being in a compromised position, and having some kind of Sasquatch experience. So I have a friend who has one like that where he fell, and I trust this guy a lot. Very experienced hunter. And he fell over and he's lying on his back, and the thing came and stood over him. So we're talking 4 feet away, not, stood over him. And in a panic, he grabbed his gun and swung around. And I remember him telling me this story, and he said the look on its face was one of incredible hurt and disappointment. And he didn't fire. And then he said it just took off like it was hovering through the forest. It was just sort of gone. So there's this correlation with, and in my situation in Romania, I was exhausted and had gone too far down a cliff and had to climb back up. So who knows?
And that's what everyone says, that they can't shoot a Bigfoot because it looks too personable.
Yeah, there's that side of this too, eh? The big game hunter. We got to go out and hunt one. That's a lot of bravado talk. That's easy
Of
talk on
course,
the couch.
right? Do you feel silly whooping?
Do I what?
Feel silly whooping?
I think now I feel silly whooping on camera.
Yeah, okay.
I feel silly whooping on camera. And you know what? And again, I've never been shy to this. One of the things that I put down to, the detriment of all this through finding Bigfoot was, just, the whooping and the tree knocking and that's a Squatch. And all of that drove me round the bend. And I'm not saying these aren't interesting methodologies for invoking a response. They might very well be, but it does start to feel silly. I think if I'm going to whoop, I'm just going to do it on my own. Even for the new Bigfoot film, very unlikely I'll be whooping and banging trees out there on camera because it's silly at this point.
I've done it, and it was college. It was a good time. Just kidding. Sorry, can you hear my dogs? They're barking right now.
I did hear a dog bark. Yeah, mine.
Okay,
I don't
yeah.
know where mine went. I got a couple here.
Okay, so in the Hoopa episode, I believe is where it was, you said that the Hoopa aren't laughing about the notion of Bigfoot. You said they're waiting for them to come back. I found that to be one of the most powerful parts in the series. What does that mean?
In Canada, we would call it the First Nations community, the indigenous communities of North America. Their lore, stories, legends, and so on are so entrenched that it's not something they have to think and talk about over a beer. Now, the younger generations maybe so, but any of them that are still kind of raised, as we'd say, on the res, up in Canada, sort of thing. Their relationship to this phenomenon is as natural as anything. It's not. It's not. They don't have to wrap their heads around it. They just grow up with it. A friend of mine, Dave Cochin, rest in peace, was talking to me about Sabe, and there's the spiritual teaching for his First Nations culture up in Canada. And I remember, and he gave me some artwork and stuff, and they have kind of like a wheel, and I can't remember. I think it's 11 different animals, and each animal represents to them an aspect of courage and loyalty and curiosity and whatever, steadfastness, and each animal is normal. It's a beaver, it's an otter, it's a wolf, it's a bear, it's an eagle, da, 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 da. And just in there, not anything special, just in there is Sabe, Bigfoot. And what I found really interesting was that to them, Sasquatch, or Sabe as they called it, represented its representation was honesty. It's really interesting. But my point being is that they don't have to do any mental gymnastics to get to this big hairy beast and say, well, he's special. He's like, because they also have, on other situations, thunderbirds and this and that, wapiti and so on. But Bigfoot is considered just right along with a wolf and a cougar and a beaver and a Bigfoot and they just like boom, part of the sentence. That's really fascinating. So for them, again, they're not struggling as we are. I mean, think about it. In the end, what are we? In the end, we were a colonial. We were colonials. We came over. We're a civilization that came over. We took over, and we've forgotten that in our own history, this legend persists. And there's some of that, but we're so divorced from it for so many years that we get over here, it can only be legendary. On the other hand, Teddy Roosevelt himself said he saw one. Our cynicism is pretty solid now, and with media, it's thick. And it unfortunately, I think if you and I came over here and we paddled a canoe, and this is 200 years ago, and we befriended a First Nations community, and they just said, and the wild man of the forest, that we would just absolutely believe. We would not have to get our heads around it. It would be simply something we were taught.
Right. Yeah, I think about that often. How it wasn't so long ago where we assumed we didn't know everything. So it was easier to believe stuff because it's like, hey, I just saw a big forest person. We'd be like, oh, now it's like, no, you didn't. BS.
Well, remember the giant squid, right? For years, the whole concept of a giant squid was laughable,
It was
and
the gorilla too.
what's that?
Even the gorilla
And the gorilla, yep.
was thought to be a myth.
And I think, what was it, 10 years ago or something? Maybe maybe a little bit more than that. They finally pull up a Japanese trawler pulls up a massive giant squid that could eat a whale. Up until then, which is whatever it was, 15, 20, 10 years ago, legendary, myth, silliness. Don't be silly. There's no squids that are that big. And they pull up a physical one. So,
Right. Do you have any new or big plans for the documentary, or is it more of the same? Which is good. We love more of the same.
well, thank you for you're kind. Thank you for saying that. No, definitely different. And so why even come back now? And why do a Kickstarter campaign? The Kickstarter campaign answer is really simple and easy. Filmmaking is very expensive. I'm not being hired by Discovery Channel to do this anymore. So you try to make things work. Editors cost money, colorization costs
Of
money,
course.
audio mixes, so all of that. So that answers that. That's just me being straightforward. Hey, everybody. Also, it opens up an opportunity for people to kind of take some ownership and do this with me. So it's kind of fun, so do the Kickstarter campaign so that I can produce a new film. Why now? 10 years after I've done that series. First of all, I've allowed that year to percolate all this time through me. And remember, there were things that happened like the telepathy that I did not feel comfortable in saying. And I'm not saying I'm over on this side of the gradient, by the way. I'm just saying things went on that I wasn't comfortable in sharing. Now I'm comfortable in sharing them. So I can address those things like the Romanian image behind me. I can address those in a new film. But what I want to do, if you look at what somebody like Doug Hychek is doing with Legend Meets Science, and I hope and believe that he's doing a new version of that, he's approaching it from a certain angle, very scientific. I love that. That's not going to be where I'm going to just stay. And then a lot of amateur filmmakers are doing some films that are, it's a lot of aerial footage and misty mountaintops and slow orchestration music and so that's fine. And a lot of the rest of it is just constant eyewitness stories. We have lots of that. You don't need me to show you more eyewitness stories properly lit and wonderfully interviewed. So what can I do? I can take this question of Bigfoot really seriously and really pragmatically and legitimately work diligently to answer the main burning questions, in an orderly like fashion. Whether you're a skeptic, whether you could give a crap, or whether you're a full-on believer and researcher, the questions remain. I think that there are some almost complete answers. In some cases, there are complete answers. In other cases, like we get really close to the answer that can be given. And I want to give those. I want to go through the process and give those. And I want to make sure that I do a film that is compelling and beautiful and powerful. I described it this recently. So I said, you know what? In the end, I would love it if someone like, say, I don't know, my niece, someone who just, if you say Bigfoot, they giggle. Someone at Thanksgiving dinner. It's like, so you still into that Bigfoot shit? Someone who thinks like that. Get them to watch what I do and come to the end of it and go and sit there and be going, huh, holy shit. That's what I want. That's where I want to bring this. I want to get it to that because we don't need to convince those who are already convinced. And I'm not really trying to convince anyone. I just would love to get maybe the skeptics off their high horse and get a little closer to, okay, I'm willing to admit there's some fucking shit going on here. And Stroud just laid it all out in a way that I can get my head around. That's where I fall in as a filmmaker, just like I did with Survivorman. I love demystifying. And with Survivorman, I just simply wanted to demystify survival and say, look, you can do this. And I want to kind of do that with the question of Bigfoot as well.
Well, I would like to see that also. Therefore, I would ask my subscribers to check out the Kickstarter. I know that there are lots of incentives that are very cool, and I will be doing myself. And also, is it true that if you get to 1 million subscribers, that we get a new season of a Bigfoot season?
You're close. You're conflating. First of all, I will say that remember too that in those rewards for the Kickstarter, the big ticket items, and I will add more if they fill up, is what they're doing well is an actual
Okay.
Bigfoot expedition with me. So you and I should talk further off camera on that. But and then there's lots of other rewards, right down to $20. What I've said is that if I get to 1 million subs on my YouTube channel, I will do more Survivorman.
More
That's what.
Survivorman.
So
Okay.
it's, yeah, more Survivor. And I will not say it here, but there will be a very big surprise associated with me doing a new Survivorman. I'm at about 855K people right now. Get me to 1 million subs. And is that a ploy? Yes, of course it is. I want to get to 1 million subs. It's a cool place to be. And it just, go down that road just a little bit. People get their noses out of joint, or their thoughts in a knot, trying to think about why we do certain things. I've never been a content creator. I'm a film producer, and I'm old school. I'm a film producer, and I happen to own all my stuff that I've ever done, and I happen to put it on YouTube, which makes me a content creator. Fine, but there's an economy behind all of that, and an engine that can make things work.
Of
And if
course.
I can bring it up to 1 million, I'll be in this place where it's like, okay, what can I do? I can afford to pay an editor X amount of dollars to edit this film work that I do properly, because I don't want to do it.
Right.
It's really as simple as that. So if I get to 1 million, I'll do more Survivorman with a very, very special twist that I'm not going to say right now.
Okay.
And with the Kickstarter campaign, I'm looking for individuals like yourself to say, look, let's do this together. I think we can do something really powerful here. And that's what I'm aiming for.
Very cool. Well, thanks a lot, Les, for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for everything you're doing. I love the style of the way you approach things, and I think it's the right way to do it. And I appreciate being on here. Thank you.
Hey guys, at the time of finishing up editing this video, Les's Kickstarter only has about 750 donors, which is an absolute travesty. So let's all support him to do this very important work, and lots of little donation make big donation. And as always, thanks an awful lot for listening.